Well, violence in the West Bank, which Israel has occupied since 1967, has risen dramatically in the last 2 to 3 years, and even more so since the war with Iran. There are now nearly daily violent, often deadly attacks by Israeli settlers and the Israeli army there. Entire communities being wiped out. In one of the more shocking killings, a family of 4 shot in the head by Israeli troops at the weekend. To get more insight, we can speak now with a former Israeli Air Force pilot turned peace activist, a member of the Mistaclim organisation, or the Occupation in the Eye organisation, which campaigns against violence by Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Guy Poran, thanks so much for your time and joining us once again here on France 24. Can I start by asking you, this family that we saw shot in the head as they were in their car in the West Bank at the weekend, particularly shocking for those of us on the outside. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, unfortunately, the incidents that are now happening on a daily basis is keeping the Israeli public, puzzled about. There is no real explanation and investigation into such tragic events because of the general strikes in Iran and Lebanon and everything. But what we do know is that the soldiers claim to have been that the vehicle of this family was approaching them in a dangerous way, and in these days, that alone would justify, in the eyes of the soldiers and their commanders, shooting the people in this vehicle, only to find out later that they were an innocent family with children. And yet, the Minister of Security, extreme right-wing Ben-Gvir, didn't wait more than a few minutes to justify the soldiers for having done so. So, unfortunately, this is the current situation in the West Bank these days.
So, before we get on to the settler violence, overall, the army presence and attacks in the West Bank is also very regular. It's not just from settlers.
Yes, well, the presence of the army, I don't think the army is actively taking such measures as we heard now. It's more of their presence there, which protects the violent settlers for doing these activities. So while in the past we used to hear about some kind of army and police forces trying to disperse or separate between the Palestinians and the settlers, this is not happening anymore. The army is taking a complete passive stand in the best case. In other cases, like we heard yesterday, they actually shoot and take part in this situation.
Tell us a bit more about the Israeli settler violence, which we understand has risen sharply over the last couple of years. I mean, you're working directly on that. What have you seen?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, over the last 2 years, and especially since the October 23, there is a sharp and steady increase in the violence against the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. And that includes, destruction of property, land takeover by illegal outposts of settlers. I was personally present as part of the Mistaclim organization in such a place that for months was a little Palestinian village in Ujar Ras El Ain, trying to maintain their life there with the sheep and their property. And then a few weeks ago, they basically gave up, and the whole area was cleaned by the Palestinians, again, with the presence of the army and police on the side. And, while we pretty used to hearing about those settlers harassing the Palestinians, stopping them from harvesting their olives, or sometimes hitting them or throwing stones. Now we're talking about them shooting and killing. It's just 2 days ago, settlers killed a Palestinian in the village of Kusra. And, while the army they announced that the settlers were arrested, it took 24 hours for them to be released and back on in the area and doing some more of those violent acts. So even when they are identified and arrested theoretically, it's a revolving door. They are immediately back in the area, and that gives them obviously the encouragement to continue with this violence. They know that the government is behind it. And, the large part of the Israeli population, which watches this with horror and shame, have nothing to do with it. They cannot do anything about it. It's ever so frustrating.
Complete impunity, and as you say, beyond that, even the backing of the Israeli government then. So how do we stop this violence?
This is a question that, we ask ourselves every day, and unfortunately, I don't have a clear answer, because with the current government and the current police minister, there isn't anything that we could do within the Israeli system. The only thing that I'm hoping for is the reason why I'm talking to you right now is that to cause the international community to raise hell and to demand the Israeli government to at least try to fight these acts of violence. And unfortunately, I must tell you, we don't see enough outrage by the international community. Of course, with all the attention to Iran and Lebanon and all these bigger wars, the settlers are taking advantage of it and are increasing their violence. So without an international outrage, I don't see any way to stop it.
Okay, so international outrage, international pressure, but you mentioned there the majority for you of Israeli citizens are against what they're seeing in the West Bank. Would they be safe to stand up and protest and show their sign against the Israeli government?
Well, it is relatively safe to do that in Israel, in Tel Aviv. We see demonstrations, which of course are the local police is trying to make it very difficult, but they're not preventing such demonstrations. Only yesterday there was a case where a right-wing violent guy tried to stop or harass some of those demonstrators, and the local police arrested some of the demonstrators instead of this guy. But going to the West Bank, to the villagers, has become very difficult, very dangerous. Some of those volunteers are in hospital now because they've been hit by those settlers. And so we see volunteers that are still courageously going out there, but it's a drop in the sea. There is no way to actually do any significant resistance to this violence.
Guy Poran, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us here on France 24 and telling us more. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much.